Kara Frederick is here. She's a research fellow for the Center for Technology Policy at the wonderful Heritage Foundation. Kara, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Great to talk to you. So tell us about this. Well, let's go big picture first. What have you seen when it comes to big tech YouTube censorship?
Oh, what haven't I seen when it comes to big tech YouTube censorship from people with heterodox views, people who would consider themselves classical liberals who just have ideas outside of the mainstream. And when I say the mainstream, I mean the culture, like you said, Hollywood, not necessarily enthralled to China, but enthralled to a leftist ideology that we see in the academy, we see in the entertainment industry, we see in big corporations and big tech. When people have views that fall outside of that in the mainstream media, you see these tech companies so readily engaged in suppressing that information and stifling that information and limiting access or cutting it off altogether to that specific information. When it comes to COVID and what these big tech companies are calling misinformation, you see that all the time, and that runs the gamut, like I said, from heterodox views to the right, to regular conservatives like myself, who are just expressing something that is maybe outside of what the New York Times or the Washington Post is telling you. So the litany of instances where this happens goes on and on and on, and we could talk about it ad nauseum, but that's just sort of a broad brush of what's going on.
Yep. And it's going to get worse. And then we saw the White House the other day saying that they're telling big tech who to censor, which is even more troubling. Well, tell us about this one instance of this account that YouTube banned.
So when it comes to, are you talking about the China instance, the Kazakh human rights? Okay, so this is a really interesting case because we've seen it happen on the domestic side. We've seen moms who don't want to mask their children and think that it should be up to the parents be censored on YouTube. But this is going beyond that. This is coming down to international human rights issues. We know that what's happening in the Xinjiang region of China, where the Uyghur minority is being held in concentration camps to the tune of 1 to 1.5 million Uyghurs. So a human rights activist set about documenting this. And what he did was create a channel for loved ones of those who are imprisoned in Xinjiang to share their stories, to get it out there into the world. And what YouTube did was they ended up taking down his channel because he, according to YouTube, violated their policy for personally identifiable information. Now, they had permission to share this information from family members on the YouTube channel. And what this highlights here is not just YouTube building an airplane in mid-flight, as when I worked at Facebook, we constantly told everyone that we were doing, because we were sort of making these policies up as we went along due to the changing nature of the landscape. So it's not just a case of YouTube doing that, but instead it's their guidelines, their opaque rules being manipulated by third parties. So we can't prove just yet that the Chinese Communist Party was behind any of this, but it sort of highlights the murkiness of all and how YouTube itself can be exploited because they don't enforce their rules consistently. Their rules are opaque. They tend to sort of decide day by day what they should do. So with this channel, the man who started it, the Kazakh Human Rights Channel, basically had to move all of these videos that documented the atrocities in Xinjiang over to a different platform because YouTube wouldn't house them, because their system was gamed. They were manipulated into taking these videos down. So it sort of just shows how this hangs on the edge of a knife.
Let's paint the alternative, because these tech companies are not American companies. I forget who, someone said that about Apple. I forget who it was. And they're like, Apple's not an American company. First of all, they're technically headquartered in Ireland for tax reasons. 75% of the big tech workforce in San Francisco is foreign born. And they make their products in China and for world markets. Like, they're barely American. And they don't have American values. So if these were truly American companies, not just located here, but values, had American values, what would a YouTube or Facebook and all the rest, what would they do with something like this?
They would stand up for the freedom of expression. I mean, when I worked at Facebook, we were constantly told to retain a cognition of the fact that our global user base was huge. 86% at the time of our users were outside the United States and Canada. This is what Americans don't often understand. These companies don't see themselves as American companies. They might provide lip service to conservative lawmakers, but in the end, they're worried about their bottom line and they're worried about servicing a user base that's global. An American company would say, no, we are standing up for our American values, for freedom of expression. We see that this value transfer is going in the wrong direction. Instead of China becoming more like us, we are becoming more like China. They should vehemently stand against it. They should articulate that they are American companies and stand for what we love best in America, the freedom of expression. There's a reason why the First Amendment involves freedom of speech. And these private companies working with the government to stifle speech, it portends some very interesting, I'd say, legal issues for these companies when they're treading into potential First Amendment violation territory. So they need to become American companies. As others have said, they need to pick a flag, and that should be the red, white, and blue.
Wow. That was deep and insightful. I want more of that. Like, subscribe, get more.